Hi, and welcome to From Zero to One, an interactive podcast where we talk to founders, innovators, and makers to understand how they went from zero to one, from nothing to something. They will inspire us to create a better and more positive future. Good morning, good evening, based on where you are around the globe. I'm Hans Paul, your host, and today we have Daniel Steinberg from Lawbrokr. Hi, Daniel, how are you?
Hans, I'm good. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. I'm very excited to have you here today. So, quick introduction about the podcast. This is From Zero to One, which is an interactive podcast where we talk to founders, disruptors, innovators about the way they got into creating a startup. The idea is to share this with other founders and aspiring founders and understand how they got there. There is no one way of creating your startup and being an entrepreneur. So we are here to learn from you and from many others after you. So Daniel, first of all, can you tell us a bit more about yourself? You started as an operator and then moved into being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, happy to. So my name's Daniel Steinberg. I was born and raised in the city of Toronto, Ontario, in Canada. Still located here in Midtown for any of those listening. My journey to legal tech is an interesting one. I have a background in professional services from an accounting front, and then navigated my way into tech sales, which led me over to one of the largest legal tech companies in North America, being Clio. Hans and I had connected sort of during my time there, and I was overseeing partnerships during that time on both the app ecosystem side and consulting partner side, helping operationalize law firm efficiencies through different types of technologies that were implemented within the firm based off size, practice area, specific law firm associate versus partner, and so forth. And it led me to a career as an entrepreneur within legal tech, to which case I started Lawbrokr about 9 months now, back in October 2021.
Congrats. And
Thank
so,
you.
how did you, come up with the idea of starting your own thing?
Yeah, so I think for me, it was more a matter of when I was going to become an entrepreneur. I think it was something that I always had aspirations to do, and the trajectory of my career was actually very prescriptive as to how do I become a very strong operator, baseline in sales, background in accounting, partnerships background, holistically working with different departments throughout the organization to really learn and understand how to be a first-time founder and a really strong operator. So for me, I got lucky and stumbled into the legal tech world being at Clio. I had went from a advocacy marketing company here in Toronto called Influitive, where I sold enterprise software for 2+ years on reputation management, reviews, online community, and so forth, and the power of advocacy there. And parlayed that with a career at Clio, where quite frankly, I was helping operationalize law firms alongside a bunch of consulting partners, accountants and bookkeepers, law consultants, IT consultants, and managed service providers. And what we were helping support them with was leveraging Clio's app ecosystem to sell what we would refer to as law firm in a box, and really get these tools out to law firms to make them more efficient, depending, again, like I said, who they are and what they actually do from a practice perspective. And because of that, my worlds collided at Clio, and I ended up running the app partnerships team over there and the channel program at the same time. And one of the biggest projects I had worked on was a project with Google, which was really all around how do we digitize law firm storefronts. And this was really pre-pandemic and rolled nicely into the pandemic, but it was more around the lines of how do we help get law firms onto the internet so that they could be found by their customers outside of a retail space that existed prior to really today's world. And during that time, it was super evident that it was, the legal market is extremely saturated. It breeds one of the most cost prohibitive solutions for law firms to actually acquire new clients. It's super expensive. And with over 1 million solo and small practitioners throughout the US alone, it's really hard for lawyers to stand out and drive new business to their practices, let alone outspend mid-sized firms. And the way that I stumbled into Lawbrokr was really merging my two worlds that existed in advocacy marketing and reputation management, and the world that existed within how do people actively get new clients to their law practices. And I took it one step at a time from there and understood the legal landscape and the marketplace problem that existed, and really formulated a hypothesis and thesis around how do we merge everyday user interactions through other experiences that people use in their everyday lives in other industries, and really parlay that and pair it with an industry in the legal sector.
Oh, that's interesting. So you mentioned Doodle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Doodle. So was that part of the Clio experience, or was it after that?
So we had built an integration with Google, and it was an integration with Google My Business. So if any of those listening, Google My Business is a free piece of software that Google provides, not just law firms, but any industry professional. When you type in X near me, restaurant near me, law firm near me, professional near me, that is powered by Google My Business. It really is your core use of digital presence. There you'll find website directions, calling structures, and so forth about those specific businesses. So our goal was to help support law firms in their growth by actively getting them on the internet through an integration via Google My Business, and that's how it started.
Interesting. So that was would you say that was that the MVP of Lawbrokr, or?
No, it was not. So Lawbrokr is not a part of Clio. It was not an MVP of Clio or anything like that. This was a partnership that we were working on together at Clio, which really sparked this understanding of the way that law firms operate their practice and try and find new clients. And that's where I hypothesized what Lawbrokr could be with a marketplace solution. But these two things are actually two separated functions as a whole. I was just really understanding the nuances of how law firms really think about their practice and diversify marketing spend on the internet. And that's sort of where I started conceptualizing what Lawbrokr could be during that time. But no, these are very much different functions.
Yeah, but that makes sense. Like finding a specific problem, an unmet problem to a solution, and then finding starting your thing. That's probably where you got the trigger, right, to start your thing. So yeah, so it's a matter of when, not a matter of if. That's a good point. So you knew that from early on that you wanted to do your thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
For me, it was an always situation. It's about patience though, right? It's not, if you want to be an entrepreneur, if you want to be a founder, some people stumble into it. Obviously I stumbled into this situation, but for me, it was always a matter of how do I become an entrepreneur, not something that I, never had aspirations to do. And then I found a gap and did it and went for it.
Mhm. How would you say your previous experiences have helped you to be to be what you are right now and build what you have built?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think previous experience is really important. It's hard to just spin something up and succeed from there. And, we're long ways away from being a success at all. But we're past the point of, no return. We've started the journey. So I can give you my experience of, how I got something off the ground and how my past experience supported that. But I don't want to sit here and explain how to be a successful entrepreneur, because I think that's a long ways away in order to get there. But I do think the past experiences of understanding how to sell yourself, how to sell a business, how to actually navigate different firms as a whole was a super important baseline. I obviously went to business school and had a major in accounting, and I was very far removed from the world of technology. I always had an interest in it, but really the accounting background was more of a baseline to understand how CEOs and COOs really run their businesses as a whole, but it wasn't something I was super passionate about. And I think passion as an entrepreneur is super important. You want to wake up every day and love what you do, and you need to be passionate about every single thing that you do because it's ups and downs every single day. I think going into sales is, quite frankly, one of the most important functions that I had ever done. It gave me a really strong understanding about selling yourself, selling a business, communicating with people. Not everyone can jump on a call like this and speak on a podcast or be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that's a really important mentality. Being comfortable with being uncomfortable is something that's really important as an entrepreneur. And I think sales teaches you that, especially in an enterprise level. I was selling solutions that were 50, 60, 70K off the shelf a year. And we were talking about reputation management and online communities, right? These are not something that had an imputed ROI 5 years ago, or, people were like, this is hotcakes, let's sell it off the shelves. It was very educational. We had to be prescriptive about the way that we sold. We had to talk to CFOs, CMOs, executives at the top, and being in enterprise sales really gives you a good, strong baseline for how to be strong, lead with conviction, and be communicative in the way that you value sell. And that's a really important factor in anything you do. And I'm not in the enterprise game right now with Lawbrokr. It is more transactional, working with solo and small practitioners, but it's the same concepts that you use every single day, no matter what. And it just makes you a better executive. Followed through with that, partnerships gives you a full breadth of the organization. You're working with executives internally. You're working with customer success teams, marketing teams, sales, and external third parties. And it gives you a very strong foothold into how do people think at an operational level outside of a sales mandate. And I think it helps you from a strategic mindset and a creative mindset to really move forward in the way that you think and operate a business moving forward. So I packaged everything in my career and used that to become a founder and operator. I think there's two really important distinctions. You either come up with something revolutionary that has never existed before, and it's not about being the best operator in the world. It's you have come up with a solution that is so different, so nuanced that no one else has ever done it. And then there's the other side of it, which is, okay, you've merged a bunch of things together and concepts together that make a really strong foundational business. But in order for you to succeed there and make it past competitors or others that exist in the market, it's on you as an executive or CEO leading the company to be a very, very, very strong operator. And that was the path that I took.
Yeah, and thank you for being here today. Today again, I mean, I saw you're very busy. You're doing great things at Lawbrokr. I saw the campaign that you're launching. I think in Toronto, on the billboards.
Yes.
With people taking pictures and selfies.
For sure. Yeah, that's a fun one, and it continues on all throughout the summer. But it's how do you be as creative as possible and think differently? You can't build the status quo. You can't just cold call. You're building a consumer brand and a B2B brand, and you need to be very different and nuanced. And you need to, quite frankly, dissect your brand so that people can align with it, because that's what makes you different. And as you know better than anyone, it's very hard for consumers to align with the legal journey. Someone uses a lawyer 1 to 3 times in their lives. It's not something that you can just actively spin up and shoot advertisements to unless they're actively looking at that moment in time.
Cool. And indeed, you are creating a marketplace, correct?
Correct.
So as we know, it's difficult, of course, because it's not one client, you have 2 clients. And at the beginning, usually you need to create an ecosystem, right? They say start with a small pilot, get both sides of the market big enough so one is interested in the other and vice versa. What's your learning from so far on this type of venture?
You want me to tell my secrets to building a marketplace? No, I'm just kidding.
Well, maybe that's for another podcast.
I think, yeah, I'm just kidding. I think remaining really focused. There's a lot of things that you can do, and there's a lot of things that everyone wants to do. And I think the way that I looked at it is I started with this massive vision and massive problem that I wanted to solve for. But you learn very quickly as not the developer side of the business. And thankfully I have a co-founder that does work on that side of the fence, but you realize really quickly that you can't do everything and launch that product right away. And I see things on Twitter and all that stuff right all the time that says, launch the product, you need to prove out this concept, right? Something that we're doing today with Lawbrokr is something that doesn't necessarily exist in the legal space prior to. There are different marketplaces for sure, and there are other people solving this problem, but in a very different way, in a different business model. And the way that we're doing it is through technology first approach and playing with this matchmaking platform that exists in other industries. And quite frankly, if you're trying something new, you need to launch that to make sure that the market actually cares for it. So remaining very focused, making sure that you're very zeroed in on a core mission and core driver and have your team striving towards ultimately one specific goal to get it to market so that then you can prove that hypothesis or test that hypothesis and grow from there is really important. And again, it all comes down to staying focused. You could bleed into so many different other problem spaces, but if you do it too fast, you don't know what solution you're trying to solve for. And I think that's one of the biggest learnings and takeaways that, we had early on. We did it right and we stayed very focused, but honestly, there's no right answer. Everyone solves for a different problem space. And, the word focus is something that comes to mind a lot.
Thanks, Daniel. So what was your focus at the beginning, going back to the marketplace? One side or both sides of the market?
So we focused early on solving for having a sufficient supply on the back end. It wasn't oversaturating our marketplace. It was actually how do we drive a sufficient amount of supply in our legal marketplace so that if we went to market, we were building a customer experience platform powered by lawyers. And if that's our brand and that's our market, if someone comes knocking, someone sure better be home on the other end. So we needed to know that we had a sufficient supply. But when we talk about focus, we focused in one geographic location, a core set of practice areas, a core set of problems within those practice areas. And then we focused on cracking the consumer nugget to make sure that consumers actually cared to shop for lawyers in this magnitude, right? We could get hundreds of lawyers on this platform if we actively tried to sell and cold call and things of that nature. But without the consumers on the other end, we would just be selling,
Correct.
a solution off the shelf that isn't operating. So you have to take it one step at a time and go very prescriptively in the way that you do it. But again, focusing and zeroing in on a specific geographic location, expertise, and having that supply on the back end so that you can test the market on the other end is something that's, really important.
Can you give us some numbers? Or
Like what, out of curiosity?
like the numbers of your marketplace? Like, can you give to the audience some of the numbers, or still early stage?
Yeah, it's still early stage, and it's so dependent. I think our numbers that we could share with you today would mean not a whole lot to others on the other end, and I don't think that it's a factor of how many or how much. It's, are you solving the solution that people are looking for? And you could figure that out very early on. It's not a matter of, do you have hundreds or thousands of lawyers on the platform? Do you have hundreds or thousands of consumers using the platform? It's actually, have you got what you would consider and constitute your minimal viable product and have consumers and lawyers coming through? And are they coming through in the way that you wanted to? If yes, fantastic. You've probably proved out your MVP. If not, then what's their feedback and how do you iterate from there? The MVP stage is more about product feedback and iteration as opposed to, did I do this exactly how I planned out on my whiteboard to the right? That's not, it doesn't usually work that way. It typically is something is missing or something could be done better. How do you do it again? And how do you fix that solution so that you can find that problem space one step faster? And for us, I'm not a lawyer. I understood the legal market and the landscape and the consumer market, but our hypotheses could have been wrong. And we needed to test those hypotheses to make sure that we were doing it right before we continued down that path.
It's not just about the numbers, but it's about the value that you bring to each side of the market, and potentially, how many, as you said, product feedback iterations, and in this case also maybe interactions between the two parties are actually happening, which is more valuable than numbers.
Exactly. I think everyone has their own subjective belief in numbers, right? There's no one size fits all. My numbers and goals could be completely different than your numbers and goals and everyone in between. Some people have early investors, some people don't. So everyone's numbers can be different and manipulated based off what actually matters to you and what problem space you're solving for at that moment in time. So it's more around, what are your goals and what do you need to prove in this phase to be able to continue on down that path versus change course.
Nice. And so that relates a bit to the Peter Thiel book, 0 to 1. What's your definition of one?
It's a good
do you
question. Sorry, say that again.
how do you define that one which is kind of product market fit, I guess, right? So what's your what's your one?
I think it's a really good question, and it's so hard to answer because, again, it's based off each individual person and their sort of mentality and thought process. For me, one was getting started. I think something, people get scared to start and become an entrepreneur, right? And my 0 to 1 was, okay, I have a concept and idea. I've probably had 1,000 of those like you, Hans. How do I actually not dip my toe in it, but dive into it and get started? And once you hit that factor, that was my one. That's me taking it from 0 to 1 and not looking back or having regrets of wanting to be an entrepreneur versus employee, or did I do the right thing by doing this and changing the trajectory of my career, or am I actually solving a very important issue and problem space? And I think that was my one was, can I dive right in and get started? And until you do that, you're at point 1, point 2, point 3, point 4, point 5. My one was actually saying, let's get started. Let's incorporate. Let's build this business. Let's find a co-founder, and let's get this off of the ground and launch something. That's my one. That would be my definition.
Nice. Hope to see a different definition in 6 months when we hopefully talk to you again, 6 or 7 months.
I hope so.
Yeah, it's different for every entrepreneur, and for me as well. Like right now, it's the company I'm working on. The speed legal, the focus is getting to 15K MRR, for example. So that's the definition of one. But what Peter, my one at the moment. But as Peter Thiel says, it depends on sector, depends on the market and on the specific company. But it's a number that ideally should be kind of easier to scale it, right? Like building the startup is like building a plane before crashing, basically. And then it's like building a car versus driving the car, right? So what we're doing, it's very complicated and it's not easy. I mean, statistics are against us, but as you said, we need to be perseverant and being able to adapt and move fast and change path when we understand it's not the right one. And
Correct. And I think depending on the phase of your entrepreneurial journey, your 0 to 1 changes often and quickly. You know what I mean? It's very much a sprint at the beginning and turns into a marathon from there.
totally. Yeah, and so as we are talking about legal and technology here, I'm interested to know what makes you excited about this space right now.
Yeah, the legal space is so ripe for disruption. I think we've seen that over the past, year and a half, 2 years, with things moving virtually and the legal verse understanding the importance and concept of cloud technology and solutions that actually make you more operational efficient to ultimately help your practice and satisfy your customers more. This whole notion of consumer experience first approach is so exciting within the legal industry and such an opportunity for, entrepreneurs like us to disrupt the market with different types of solutions that ultimately help law firms in their day-to-day practices or the people around them in their practices to ultimately deliver the best professional service opportunity possible to their customers. And it's exciting. I think there's this notion of the modern lawyer and people that want to use disruptive technology and break down barriers in the way that law is traditionally practiced, whether that be taking the hourly rate and moving that to fixed fee, or leveraging different solutions to give their clients an upfront understanding of what's happening behind the scenes and breaking those barriers of how to actually leverage solutions that consumers want. Because at the end of the day, you are delivering a service, and that service is very complicated. And I think consumers have never really been educated enough on the legal opportunities or engagements that exist, because it's operated in a world where it's not necessarily positioned or spoken to on the consumer side, by breaking down what the legalese are and how people can actually adapt and adopt different solutions and law firms themselves. And I think what's exciting is that's turning on its head and turning into a more modern industry and focus of technology first approach. So I think it's really exciting, and you see it every day. There's a new legal tech company popping up. There's a new legal tech company getting funding, and all of that is going to be gearing towards the disruption and ultimately breaking down the barriers of the access to justice gap to help support people access legal services. So it's exciting.
Nice. That's very true, Daniel. Yeah, I mean, there is for sure more offer. But demand is getting also stronger, right? Because I believe the market that you're talking about, lawyers, attorneys, but also legal professionals and business professionals, are actually making steps ahead and that's due also to the advance in technology that we have seen, and make this let's say kind of word that has been used for a long time, like more than 20 years, legal tech, makes it as you said, ripe. It's ripe for disruption, so it's a good time. And yeah, I really believe in what you said, and numbers are also validating the what we just said. Basically, investments have been increasing. I was reading a report about Gartner about the investments in legal tech is 3x by 2025. So it's I mean, yeah, it's interesting. Cool. So I think more on the entrepreneurial side and your entrepreneurial journey, and we want to keep it like 30 minutes, not longer. So I just asked a couple other questions, but potentially. So what's one of the hardest decisions you've made regarding your company so far?
Yeah, so I'll preface this, like we said before, as 9-month-old company. Obviously, I've made some hard decisions, but there's more decisions to come. I think the hardest decision that we had to make was, what's that first hire out of the co-founder stage? Who is that individual? Is it a developer? Is it the marketing side? And what it comes down to is making a decision based off what's best or what you perceive to be best for your business. And for us, it was actually taking an approach of a B2C type of brand and building that brand affinity, that brand awareness. And we went forward with a business/operations side role on the marketing and design function. But we didn't know if that was right? And we talked about before, you have to build, and get the tool out to market to be able to test your hypothesis. But we decided to go against that decision on hiring a secondary developer because we thought we had a good foothold on building and taking our MVP to market, and we need to build a brand around that in order to succeed, in our opinion. So that was probably the hardest decision we had made thus far, because you never know which way that goes.
Nice. One question that,
and by the way, it was the best decision for us. So we're very happy with that decision, is how I should leave that.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, and every startup is different, so that's actually that worked for you. May not work for someone else, but it's glad to hear it worked out. So one question that we ask to all our guest speakers, entrepreneurs, not an easy question. Peter Thiel itself says that is one of the questions he uses to evaluate an entrepreneur. Is what important truth do very few people agree with you?
Yeah, it's a very hard question, challenging question to have to think about. For me, and again, truth is a relative term, but for me, it's taking bets on individuals that are young and hungry, and always figure out a way to win and have a will to win, right? You can always get someone that is more experienced, that's done it before and things of that nature. But as a young, hungry startup that has to move in 500 different directions, taking bets on someone that can be a Swiss Army knife in your back pocket and support you in every which way is something that I live by. And some people might think that's a crazy move. And in order to succeed, you need to have someone that's been there, done that before, especially as a first-time entrepreneur and founder on both your co-founders' side. But that's something that I truly do believe in, and think it's a very important way to become successful and drive hustle mentality.
That's great. Thanks so much, Daniel. Once I was speaking to an MD of a big consulting firm, and he he told me one thing, and he said, "You know, to be successful, you need to learn one thing, and that thing is, managing people." So I really believe that what you said, like, it makes sense, like taking bets on people and really, putting all your bets into someone is actually, it's very important as a startup founder, and you need to, kiss different frogs, as we say, in order to find the prince or the princess, right? But eventually, you'll find those that are 10x, exponential individuals, and will help you and your team achieve what you've set yourself onto. Thank you, Daniel. I think that was a great episode, and I'm very glad that you participated. And thank you again for being here with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun sharing some insights and stories from the early days. So appreciate it.
Thank you, and good luck to the team, your founder and the entire team at Lawbrokr. And then we hope to see
Thank you.
you here again soon, and tell us more and give us
You
new
name the
definition.
date and time. Name the date and time. We'll be here.
Thanks so much. Thank you again. Thank you everyone for listening today, and we'll see you again for the next episode here very soon. From 0 to 1. Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. Cheers.
Thanks.